Welcome to the Run for God Run Club, where you will find God in a runner's space.
Welcome to the Run for God Run Club. This is your one stop each week to be motivated and inspired to get off the couch and onto the running trail, where you can in turn inspire others to do the same. Let's learn, laugh, and leap into running together, giving God the glory for what we are able to do in His name. Amen. I am your running host, Dean Thompson, sharing his wisdom, sharing his wit, sharing his unique point of view is Run for God founder Mitchell Hollis.
Thanks for having me, Dean.
You know, God works things out in amazing ways, and we're going to share a story today of one instance that happened way over in Flagstaff, Arizona. Of course, if you're listening to this, you may be in Flagstaff or close to Flagstaff, and it might not be way over. But for us, it's way over there. And in lessons, they're all around us. We learn them in all sorts of ways, and sometimes in ways we don't really like. And I'm going to share a Dean's Thoughts story about one of those today.
You know, Dean, I want to share before we get started a little bit about this week's supporter of Run for God, which is State Farm Brandon Combs Agency here in Dalton. You know, when you make the right decision, it feels good. It's kind of like picking the perfect accent rug, or choosing a good night's sleep over an all-night crime show binge, which I've done before. You know, it feels really good to make the right insurance decision, too. That's why Brandon Combs, State Farm agent right here in Dalton, Georgia, you need him to help you select the right protection at the right price. Brandon will make sure you understand your coverage so that you'll know what to expect when the unexpected happens. With State Farm agent Brandon Combs, it's easy to make the right choice. Just call him when you want to make the real deal like a good neighbor. State Farm is there.
You know, he's my agent, too.
He's my agent.
And I can attest to the fact that he's there when you need him.
Yeah.
He has done some things for me and made some phone calls and done some things that made a big impact.
Insurance is one of those things you hate to write that check every month. But, man, and I've needed them. You're glad they're there when you need them. So,
amen.
Give Brandon a call. Check him out. He'll be happy to talk to you.
Yeah. So here's a Facebook post from this past week, and I really like this one. It starts out with a verse of Scripture, Proverbs 1:7, that says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction." Today's run was all about not being a fool and heeding wisdom and instruction. Major shout-outs to Dean Thompson and Rebecca McGeorge for sharing long-run wisdom with me that was easy to grasp and apply. Dean, in this week's podcast, spoke of the relationship between long-run pacing and easy-run pacing, stating that if my long run, you should be able to hold at my easy-run pace. So today, I set out to do a continuous run, not my typical walk run, holding my easy run pace, which was 8:45 to 9 minutes. This was, I'm not sure what I've done here. This was a mental hurdle for me, but it made sense, and I wanted to heed the wisdom I was receiving. And then, bang, even pacing at 8:50. Rebecca commented on a post in which I lamented late mile woes that I should consider in-run fueling, since my run was stretching into the 1 to 2 hour range. Today, I brought along a bottle of Tailwind, reacquainted myself with my old fueling scheme, and bang, I had strong legs to finish the run. I am thankful for this group, not only for the wisdom, but for the godly fellowship and encouragement received every day and the prayer support so freely and graciously extended inside and outside of our running lives. Love you all. You are a great and gracious gift to me. I would be truly a fool not to learn from each of you. Keep shining your light and enjoying the journey, my friends. And that comes from Pat Park. This is the second one I think we shared from Pat.
Yeah.
He just has
He's always got some good posts.
He does. So yeah, sometimes you just have to trust in what you're told. Mm-hmm. Heed some wisdom, and it makes a big difference.
Trust the training.
Trust the training.
I'm having to tell myself that right now.
Yeah. I heard you griping a little bit about having to run a little bit more than you wanted to.
We've always talked about this, that things get harder the older you get, and I seems like I keep getting smacked with that every week right now. I remember when I started running in my 20s and even through my 30s, it was easy to take a little time off and then come right back. And this time around, of course, this is the first time I've taken that long off. I took almost a year off from running. I walked a lot, and I think I've said on here that this is the first time that I've actually gone through our own training programs.
Yeah.
The previous times I've gone through the 5K challenge with classes and things, but it wasn't out of necessity for my fitness.
Yeah.
Well, now it's out of necessity. And so I feel, believe me, if you're out there and I'm seeing your post that this is hard and I don't know if I can do it, I'm right there with you. Please know that yesterday was the 2-mile run, just a 2-mile easy run, and it was hard. And for a guy that used to run ultras and all these crazy events, it's taken some getting used to, but I'm trusting the training.
Yeah.
I'm trusting what's on our plan, and it's working. I have the days, I have the bad days, but like you always say, if you don't have the bad days, you don't have anything to compare the good ones to. So
that's right.
I'm right there with you guys.
Wow. So our trivia question from last week was kind of an odd one. It was the 1904 Olympic Marathon was held in St. Louis. It was the first in the United States, and the marathon was crazy for several reasons. Just tell me one of those reasons. And
you've got a lot of them here.
There's a bunch of them. I mean, it was a crazy, crazy race. I took this article out of Smithsonian Magazine, so I'm taking a lot of the references that I got from there. I read a lot of other stuff, but the one from Smithsonian was fun to read. So this marathon was held in St. Louis. Well, at the same time that they held the Olympics in St. Louis, they held it concurrently with the World's Fair. Now, why in the world anybody would do – of course, the Olympics weren't quite as big back then as they are today, and the World's Fair was probably bigger then than it is today. And so the World's Fair kind of took over. Mm-hmm. There were some great things that came out of the Olympics, but the World's Fair it's kind of a sideshow, where they do events like grease pole climbing and ethnic dancing and crazy, weird stuff that people are glued to because it's freaky. I mean, we're it's like driving by a wreck. We can't help but look at it.
Right.
Some of the good things that came out of the Olympics, there was a gymnast named George Iser who earned 6 medals, including 3 gold medals, and he had a wooden leg, a gymnast. That's interesting to me. I like it. So, but the 1904 marathon was more part of the World's Fair, seemingly, than the Olympics because it was like a sideshow. It was a carnival act. And it was so bad, it was so scandalous, and it was so awful that they almost never had the Olympic marathon again. That's how bad this whole thing went. And a few of the runners were seasoned runners. They had run the Boston Marathon or other runners. There were a bunch of folks from the United States who were seasoned runners. But the majority of the field was composed of middle distance runners and just people who were just there thinking, yeah, I think I can do this. And so Americans Sam Meller, A.L. Newton, John Lorden, Michael Spring, and Thomas Hicks were all experienced marathoners, so they were all among the favorites because they had done it before. And there was another American named Fred Lors, who we're going to talk about here, who was, again, American, did all his training at night because he was a bricklayer. And so can we imagine today a Olympic?
I've always said bricklayers are the toughest people out there.
Yeah.
They are.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Kind of reminds me of Yuki Kawauchi, the guy from that won Boston a few years ago when the weather was so bad.
Oh, yeah.
Who had to call his boss at
and
home.
ask him if he could take an extra day to get his award.
Yeah.
I love that story.
Love that story. And Yuki's a professional marathon now.
Really?
Yeah.
So was he a teacher? What was he? I don't even remember what he was. I think he was a teacher.
I want to say you're right.
Yeah.
Well, interesting. Among the leading oddities were 10 Greeks who had never run a marathon before, 2 men of the Sauna tribe of South Africa who were in St. Louis as part of the South African World's Fair exhibit. So they decided,
while we're here,
let's
run the Olympic marathon.
Yeah, and they went to the starting line barefoot. And then there was this Cuban guy named Felix Carbajal, who is a crazy, interesting story. He came into New Orleans, apparently got involved in some gambling stuff, lost all of his money in dice games, and then just had to figure out how to make his way to St. Louis. The guy was only 5 feet tall. And so everybody noticed him because he came to the starting line with this big, blousy, white button-up shirt, long, dark pants, and no running shoes, but just basic, street shoes, and a what do you call that type of hat? I can't remember Anyway, he had a hat on as well, and so one of the Olympians felt really sorry for him. He seemed like a nice guy. Apparently, he was real chatty, and they came over and cut the legs of his pants off so that he could wear shorts. So on August the 30th, remember this is in St. Louis on August the 30th. It's a little hot.
Nice and warm.
Right. Yeah. At 3:03, David Francis, the president of the Louisiana Purchase Exposition Company, fired the starting pistol, and the men were off. This was held in conjunction. The World's Fair was all about the Louisiana Purchase and how it had added to the United States and all that. So this was all part. It was just kind of all melded together. The heat and humidity went into the 90s, and this 24.85-mile race was awful. Apparently, it was crazy hilly. Somebody said that it was the most difficult a human being was ever asked to run, is the way they put it. And to make matters worse, the roads were so dusty that there were like inches of dust on the road. So as cars went across the road, because they didn't close the course down, there were cars, and they had to dodge cars, trolleys, trains, all sorts of things along the way. There were cracked stone across the roadways that they had to dodge. It was crazy. There were only 2 water stops on the entire course, and they were not your typical water stops. One of them was a water tower at 6 miles, and then there was a well next to the road at 12 miles. That was their water stops. And here was the craziest part about it. James Sullivan, who was the chief organizer of the Olympic Games, decided that he wanted to minimize their fluid intake so that we could test the effects of purposeful dehydration while it was 90 degrees outside. Apparently that was a common area of research at the time. Didn't seem like the greatest idea under the circumstances. So cars that were carrying coaches and doctors, they were kind of motoring alongside the runners, and all this dust was getting kicked up because the road was so dusty. So Fred Loers, the bricklayer, he starts off in the lead to start with, but then by the first mile, Thomas Hicks, who was an experienced marathoner, kind of took over and edged ahead. And then a guy named William Garcia of California almost became the first fatality of any Olympic marathon when he collapsed on the side of the road and was hospitalized, and he was hemorrhaging because the dust had coated his esophagus and ripped his stomach lining, is the way they put it. So I don't know how it does that, but it sounds pretty serious. John Lorden suffered a bout of vomiting, so he gave up. And then here's one we can all identify with. A guy named Len Tao, one of the South African participants, was chased off by dogs, in this case wild dogs. So he went a mile off course. In the meantime, Felix Carvajal, the guy from Cuba, he just kind of trotted along in his cumbersome shoes and his billowing shirt, and he made time to stop and chat with people along the way. Seemed like a real friendly dude. On one occasion, he stopped a car and he saw that there were people in this car. They were eating peaches, and he asked for one. Well, they told him he couldn't have one. Well, he snatched it out of their hand and ran with it anyway, and just kind of laughed as he went. A bit further along the course, he stopped at an apple orchard and snacked on some apples, which turned out to be rotten. So Felix wound up laying down on the side of the road in the Olympic marathon to take a nap. So now Sam Mellor, another American, he was in the lead, and he started experiencing severe cramping, so he slowed to a walk, and he eventually stopped. At the 9-mile mark, cramps also plagued Loers. So Loers decided, to hitch a ride. So he got in a car and he started driving along the course in this car, talking with spectators and runners as he passed by. And then Hicks, one of those early American favorites, the guy who led early, he was begging for somebody to give him something to drink, but he was refused anything to drink. So they sponged his mouth out with warm distilled water. That seems helpful. 7 miles from the finishers, the handlers fed him a concoction of strychnine and egg whites. So this is the first recorded instance of drug use in modern Olympics. Strychnine.
Not what you think of when you hear doping.
No.
Strychnine.
No. Apparently, strychnine in small doses was commonly used as kind of a stimulant back then, and so they thought that would help. And of course, there were no rules against it at the time. So this guy also was carrying some French brandy with him while he was running. Decided not to drink it at this point, though. So he kept going. Meanwhile, Lors, the guy that was riding in the car, recovers, and he gets out of the car and starts running. And so one of Hicks's handlers, they called him, saw Lors running and ordered him off the course. Said, "You can't run. You were in a car just not long ago." And he just kept running. So he comes into the stadium, and the crowd is cheering, and he runs around the track, and he finishes, and he wins. And so Alice Roosevelt, the daughter of the president, she is the one that she places a wreath on Lors's head and everything. And as she's about to put the medal around his neck, somebody speaks up and goes, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, hold on a second. We have an imposter here." And the cheers all turn to boos. And Lors just kind of smiled and goes, "Yeah, I was just joking. I didn't really do this. I hitched a ride." And so now Hicks he gets word that they figured him out. So he gets a little bit more energy going. Although he looks terrible from the strychnine.
You think?
He gets perked up. He gets into another trot. Maybe he's going to win this thing. His trainers gave him another dose of strychnine and egg whites, and this time they washed it down with brandy. They got some warm water and soaked his body and his head, and after the bathing, he appeared to revive and quickened his pace. And then he began hallucinating, believing that the finish line was still 20 miles away. In the last mile, he was begging for something to eat, and then he begged to lie down, and then he was given more brandy, but he refused to drink tea. He swallowed 2 more egg whites, and boom, he comes into the stadium. He's almost walking as he comes into the stadium. He's got reduced to a shuffle, and his trainers actually carry him across the finish line, holding him up while his legs are moving as if he's running. And it took 4 doctors and 1 hour for Hicks just to feel well enough to get up and leave the grounds. He had lost 8 pounds during the course of the race, and he was declared the winner. So he said, "Never in my life have I run such a tough course. The terrific hills simply tear a man to pieces."
So I don't see the time here. Did it tell his time?
It did. It wasn't in the article, and I wanted to go back and look at it, and I never did go back to look at it. But
it's funny how I guess things have changed through the years, because I've seen, we've all seen I've seen the pictures of the Tour de France back during this era. And you know how between stages on the Tour de France now, they're getting massages and getting recovered and having the right meals and everything because they're doing this for 30 days straight. But back during this era, they were drinking and smoking cigarettes and partying every night between stages. And it's just... It's
like Babe Ruth drinking while he's standing on third base.
Right. Yeah. It's...
Yeah.
Wow, how times have changed.
Yeah, they have. Well, and then Hicks and Lors, they met again in the Boston Marathon the following year, and Lors actually won that one without anything extra. So
that we know of.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, just a crazy, crazy story. I love it. I had never heard this story before and just heard of it recently. So I thought I'd heard all the running stories, but I haven't.
That one's good.
It is. So
people have got a lot of answers to choose from.
Yes, they do.
On that one.
Yes, they do.
So, yeah.
All right, so we're on this journey. We're in the 10K training. We're on the couch to marathon journey.
Yeah.
Everything going well?
It's going well. Yeah. Memberships are continuing to grow. We're still
Awesome.
getting people jumping in the 10K challenge. Just one thing about Disney, we have made the decision that we will not be doing a block of bibs just because of the uncertainty of this year. Ironically, we still have no word from Disney about the details of the race. We assume, we hope, we're planning that the Disney Marathon will happen, but there is no word from Disney yet. They just did announce that one of their 10Ks is a green light for 2022. So we're hoping that they're going to be bringing word forth. There's a lot of other websites out there that are speculating that it's going to happen, but still no firm word from Disney yet. So everybody just be patient.
Yeah.
Keep charging ahead. If they don't have Disney Live for whatever reason, we will have a backup and punt option of some sort. We don't know what that is yet, but just be patient.
I understand there's a marathon, I think, in Maui at about the same time.
Don't tell my wife that.
Oh, okay.
Don't tell my wife that. But yeah, just be patient. There is no word yet. There's a lot of speculation out there, but there is no official word from Disney yet. So just be patient.
Yeah. Well, as always, we're proud to be sponsored by the world's greatest digital music platform, J Radio.
As a mom, I want to make sure we choose a cereal that's not entirely derived from sugar. Their car seats have to be nationally CPS certified, and their first car has to have every possible safety feature known to man. I just want to do my best to make sure that they're safe. One thing I don't have to worry about is the content they hear on J Radio. Not only do they love the music, but I know it's only going to be a positive message that I would approve of. Now, if I could just figure out how to get my youngest from sticking everything up his nose.
Sign up at jradio.com and download the new J Radio app in your app store.
All right, we are back, and during the break, we looked up the time for that winning marathon in 1904, and the winning time was 3:28:53.
That's incredible. I mean, that is incredibly slow.
Yeah.
Even for back then.
Yeah, even back then, there were people running under 3 hours.
Yeah.
So.
But
you can see why when you hear the story behind it.
It was a fiasco.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Love it. All right, so you can send messages to dean@runforgod.com if you've got questions about training, if you've got questions about whatever. I received a bunch of emails this week from folks just asking questions, so ask away. And again, as I always say, if you don't know about us, go check us out at runforgod.com or runforgodrunclub.com. And we want to hear your story. We're going to share somebody's story here. This is a great story this week. I love it. And we want to hear your story. So submit your story at runforgod.com or runforgodrunclub.com. And we have had a few people who have shared their story live, and it's been a lot of fun. And so if you live close enough, or even if you don't live close enough, but you can get here, we would love to do your story.
It's a lot of fun.
It is.
We've had a lot of comments. I'm a little self-conscious because our most popular episodes are when I'm not here.
That's hurtful. That's
hurtful. But I'm saying it's not me. It's just we have some incredible guests on
That's
here.
absolutely true.
And so, I'm going to brush it off as that. But, it's if you can get here, we would love to have you in studio and hear you tell your story.
Amen. All right. Hey, my son and his wife are fostering a 6-year-old little girl right now. So this next story is about adoption, and so it's near and dear to my heart because we've talked a lot about whether or not they're going to adopt this little girl. There's some things that say they should move in that direction and may move in that direction.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so they're she's a smart little girl, and I just love her, but she's we're not sure where it's going to head to at this point. But they've had her for almost a year now.
Really?
So yeah. God can work things out in simple ways, but ways we might not even be thinking about. Sometimes it comes out of nowhere, and that's kind of the story here that's shared from Flagstaff, Arizona. Again, Flagstaff, Arizona. Shannon Clifford is her name, and the story is called Our Adoption Story. After suffering a miscarriage, I fell into a time of depression during which I started questioning my faith. Was God real? And did he really love me? Or did I believe simply because that was what I had been taught my whole life? Ultimately, I found the answers I was looking for and then started seeking a deeper relationship with God. He gave me 2 specific scriptures pointing to me having a child within a year of having that baby, of losing that baby, I kept waiting and waiting to get pregnant, but it didn't happen. When a year came and went, I figured that I had just heard God wrong, which I could live with because of the foundation I had built and the knowledge that I could trust God. Also, I had realized that my contentment did not lie in having a child, but rather in having a relationship with God. I still had a great desire for a child and had broached the subject of adoption with my husband, Jim. But our conversations always went like this. Me, what do you think about looking into adoption? Him, we're never going to do it. He did not believe that adoption was for us. So I prayed that if we were to have children, that God would either help me to get pregnant again or change Jim's mind about adoption. A couple of years later, I had a dream in which I was looking at the mountains where I live. On one side of the mountain was a rainbow, and on the other side was a sundog. Both are caused by refraction of sunlight on a moisture in the atmosphere, but you would never see a rainbow and a sundog at the same time. In my dream, I was looking at this and thinking, that is impossible. When I awoke, I realized that it was a dream given to me by God. A rainbow represents a promise, and I believed the promise that God had given me of having a child within a year was impossible because that year had long since passed. Not long after that, I received a phone call from my uncle. During our conversation, he said, "Oh, by the way, do you remember your cousin Yvonne? They're looking for a family member that would be willing to adopt her daughter, Amy, and I thought of you." Yvonne had died 3 years earlier, leaving her 2 young daughters to live with her sister. Although they were my cousins, I had never met them. At the time I received the call, Amy was 10 years old. I was told that an incident had happened at her aunt's house and that Amy could no longer live there. No close family members could take her in, so arrangements were made with family and friends who had 3 young daughters around Amy's age. She was with them for several months, and they were considering adopting her and had started paperwork for legal guardianship, but they had realized that adding another child was not working out for the family and issued an ultimatum in order to get some action. Find another place for her or she would be turned over to Child Protective Services in a few days. That's when I got the phone call. I agreed to talk to my husband about it, but didn't have much hope because Jim had told me that we weren't going to adopt. I called him at work and asked him to meet me for lunch because I had something important that I needed to talk to him about. He sounded a little apprehensive when I said okay. When he said okay. We met for lunch and I explained the situation, but that we didn't have to give an immediate answer, that we could wait and tell them the next day. He had a deer in the headlight look. Poor guy. I told him that I would be praying about our decision throughout the day, and he could do the same while he was working. Then I went home. When he went out to his truck to return to work, he heard God say to him in an audible voice, "You will take this girl and raise her as your own." Talk about changing his mind about adopting. He didn't tell me about that right away, though. I guess he needed to process it. That evening, while I was attending a class, Jim called. Amy's foster mom, how we referred to that family, to get more details. When I got home, we talked about it and made the decision to say yes. It was wonderful and terrifying at the same time. In my mind's eye, there was always a baby when I pictured becoming a mom, whether it was the one I gave birth to or the one we adopted. Amy was 10 years old. I was kind of freaking out until Mom said, "Shannon, When you turned 10, I didn't know how to be a mom to a 10-year-old either. You just take it one day at a time. For some reason, that really reassured me. Because we were in different states, we didn't want to just go pick her up and bring her home with us without making sure it was done legally. Her foster family loved her and agreed to let her remain there until we could make arrangements. We consulted with family practice attorney, and while we were in his office, he made a conference call to a colleague in California where Amy was to make sure that we did everything legally according to both states' laws. His colleague just happened to be familiar with Amy's case because he had been the one working on the legal guardianship paperwork for her foster family. Within 2 weeks, we were able to pick her up and bring her to Arizona. Amy and I are not related closely enough process to be as easy as everyone was hoping, and it took over a year before the adoption was legal. There was a lot of paperwork. Included in the pile of paperwork from her life was a copy of her mother's death certificate. When I saw the date, it struck me. It was within a year that I thought God had promised me a child. Even that impossible thing was not, because God sees all of it from the beginning to the end. One rainy night I was driving and the clouds had broken, allowing the full moon to shine through. I saw something out of the corner of my eye that looked like a jet's contrail. The closer I got home, the more pronounced it became, and by the time I arrived, I was seeing it fully, a huge white rainbow. I had never heard of a lunar rainbow, but Google educated me to the fact that, yes, indeed, it's a real thing. I knew that it was a message from God telling me that sometimes His promises don't look exactly like we are expecting them to. His blessings of motherhood certainly didn't look anything like what I was expecting, but it was definitely from Him, and I will be forever grateful.
That's an incredible story.
Yeah. You know, adoption it's a noble thing. I can't imagine that the gratitude that a kid feels from being adopted. You know, we've got a girl on our college cross country team who's from India, and she grew up in severe poverty. She was born into severe poverty. I can't remember the age that she was when she was adopted by a family here in America. But the family that's here in America is pretty well off. So she went from one extreme to another extreme. And it's funny to watch her because she's got some of those characteristics of a kid who's kind of spoiled. You know, a lot of times they can't help it, you know, because they have certain ways about them and things that they do and say. Sure. But she also, at the same time, has all those qualities of understanding where she came from. Right. And she'll go way out of her way to help somebody who needs something because of how she grew up. And she loves her parents.
Yeah, we've got a family in our neighborhood that's actually on their fourth adoption now. Yeah. And it's a noble thing. Obviously it's something that we've never been called to. But man, I admire those families that step out and do that. And it's a special person. It's a special couple to do that.
It absolutely
because
takes that.
So many times, in this case it was a 10-year-old, and some of these kids in my neighborhood are older, and those are tough. Yeah. Because they have been marked by background, and when it's a child, when it's a baby, it's a different thing. Even though it's still challenging, I'm sure. But the ones that are a little bit older, that's got to be a challenge.
Yeah. Well, in my son's case, she was 5 years old when they took her in, and she had been in 6 different homes in the past 5 years, and that makes it tough. Sure. Because she's just waiting to be rejected.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to see.
Yeah. And this story, you can't help but think of Mary. When the angel of the Lord came to her and said, "You're going to be with child, even though you're a virgin." Yeah. Or Sarah. Yeah. You look back in the Bible. God told her you're going to have a child, and she was 90. She laughed. Yeah. Kind of makes you wonder why. That's interesting. This story is very interesting that God very clearly spoke to this lady and her husband.
And her husband, yeah.
And it's a really awesome story.
And I like the fact that she gets this word from God, and she feels convicted that she got this word from God, and then at a point she gives up on it, and she thinks, maybe I didn't really hear that. And how often have we all done that, right? We've all felt, God has a certain way for us to go or a certain thing for us to do, and then it seems like, well, maybe he didn't really say that, and only to find out later that things came to be exactly like he promised you that he would.
Right.
Scripture passage, Jeremiah 29:11 through 14. For I know the thoughts that I think towards you, says the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you a future and a hope. Then you will call upon me and go and pray to me, and I will listen to you. And you will seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart. I will be found by you, says the Lord, and I will bring you back from your captivity. I will gather you from all the nations and from all the places where I have driven you, says the Lord, and I will bring you to the place from which I cause you to be carried away captive.
This is the second week we've dealt with this verse and talked about Jeremiah. Last week we were talking about how we need more Jeremiahs, and this was a prophetic letter from Jeremiah to the people of Israel. In fact, the whole book of Jeremiah is prophecy. Jeremiah was a prophet, and this letter was written to the Israelites while they were being held captive in Babylon for 70 years, which is the number of completion, ironically enough. 7 times 70, we hear the number 70 a lot in the Bible. But my initial thing when I hear Jeremiah saying this, do you ever think Jeremiah was thinking, I told you, I've been telling you for 70 years. But he didn't. And that's just the nature of God. The nature of God coming through Jeremiah, that we mess up all the time. We don't listen. We pay for our mistakes. And God is standing there, not with I told you, but I love you.
Yeah.
I want what's best for you.
Yeah.
And that's how we're to live as parents.
Yeah.
But too many times as parents we're like, son, I told you.
Yeah.
But God's not that way. He's standing there in love every time we mess up. Every time we make a boneheaded decision, every time we just don't listen and thumb our nose at him. That's just the character of God, and it's awesome.
And he's there whenever we turn around.
Right. We don't have to go back to find him.
Yeah. We just have to turn around, and there he is.
Yeah.
And that's the part about this story, is she talks about how she was not in a good place. And it wasn't until she got in a good place with her relationship that these things started to play out and to fall in place.
Sure.
And that's kind of the way it is. It's kind of the way it was with the Israelites back then in Jeremiah's time, so the way it is for all of us today.
Right.
Scripture passage 2, Psalm 37, 4 and 5. Delight yourself also in the Lord, and he shall give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass.
We always say you got to back up, and you got to bookend. You got to read the verses on either side, and you got to back up to verse 1 to get the context here. And it's, don't be envious of evildoers, is what the psalmist was talking about here. In fact, the title for chapter 37, at least in my study Bible, is The Heritage of the Righteous and the Calamity of the Wicked. I want a heritage of integrity, but that comes with hardship. It's so easy to look at people and say, we've talked about this on here. Why don't bad things happen to bad people? It seems like bad things always happen to good people. But if you put it in context of eternity, a heritage of integrity comes with hardship. Yeah. I feel like we repeat ourselves on here a lot, but it's worth repeating.
Yeah.
Your heritage, we actually talked about this last night in our small group. I talk about our small group of high school boys often, and we talked about what is going to be said at your funeral. That's really what's important. You're either going to live a life of integrity, or you're going to live a life of hypocrisy. And Matt said in the message last night, he said, integrity is not something you have degrees of.
Yeah.
You either have it or you don't. And that's a representation of, is God leading you? Are you walking closely with God? Or are you not? And
I like that thought, that there aren't degrees of integrity.
Because as sinful people, that's what we like to do. I have more integrity than whoever.
Yeah.
My sin is not as bad as their sin. No, sin is sin in God's eyes.
Yeah.
And integrity, either you have it or you have hypocrisy.
Yeah.
Hypocrisy. And
that's a good thought. In this verse, it's talking about delighting in the Lord, and I think that's one of the things that we love, the part that says He's going to do all these things, right, for us. But the part of delighting yourself in the Lord, think about that phrase, delighting yourself in the Lord. I mean, it really means embracing and desiring, and those times when we get up in the morning and we want to do some Bible study and it's hard because we're forcing ourselves to do it, those times should really be few and far between, because it should be something we desire to do.
Yeah.
If we're delighting in the Lord, we can't wait to get with Him in the mornings or whenever you choose to do it. And so I think that's an important part of this, is that God's gonna help you out, but He's gonna help you out when your heart's right,
in His time.
Time.
I mean, like I said, you go back to the title of 37 in my Bible. It's the heritage of the righteous and the calamity of the wicked. The heritage indicates in the end, in the end, the righteous, it turns out good.
Yeah.
In the end.
Yeah.
But what happens during the middle? You look at people, you look at some successful people who are living horrible lives and they're so successful. In the end, they fall in calamity.
Yeah.
But here on earth, many times, that's just not the case. And yeah, you're right. We love the parts of the Bible that talk about the good things, but so many times the good things we'll never see here on earth.
Yeah.
It's in the end. It's the heritage.
Yeah, I like that. Mark 10:27 says, "But Jesus looked at them and said, with men it is impossible, but not with God, for with God all things are possible." We see all these miracles in the Bible, and we know when God says all things, He ain't kidding.
Right.
Because there are so many things in the Bible that are just crazy stories. Jonah. I mean, that to me, that's the most incredible one. A lot of people talk about the earth flood, raining, and the earth flooding, and Noah's Ark. That story, I don't know. Jonah and the fish. That just seems more outlandish than anything.
Right.
But it happened because we know it happened.
But in our own lives, we often forget those Jonah moments. I mean, we've all had those Jonah moments, but we chalk them up to so many other things. But if you really look back, if you're a child of God and you really look back, and there's been times in your life, I know there's been times in my life where I thought, I can't get through this. This is impossible. And God brings us through it. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those Jonah times where you're saying, wow, God just brought me through that immensely deep valley, and now I'm on the mountaintop. But the next valley we go into, we have such short-term memories that we just can't think back to those mountaintops that He's brought us to, that we said we'll never get there. Yeah. And we all have them.
Yeah. Well, and the Israelites went through it over and over again, right?
They never got it. And we read those stories now, and we're like, how did they not get that? Yeah. And in the meantime, we're saying, God can never get me through this. It's so... We're so, I don't know what that conditioning, human? Yeah, ADD. We forget. I don't know. But I say it all the time. How did the Israelites see a fireball at night and a cloud that was leading them by day, that had food raining down from heaven, the Red Sea parted, and they complained.
Yeah.
But we do the same
Yeah.
exact thing. And that's why God talks about it over and over and over. And why we rehash it on here over and over and over is because we need it repeated to us over and over.
Because we still don't get it.
Exactly.
Question 1. What would you do if the foundations of your faith were shaken and you found yourself feeling like God didn't really love you, if he even existed? I always go back to apologetics, and I'm a logical person. I like to form arguments based on logic. And so to me, my thing is, and other people are different, I think we're all different in this. To me, I go back to, okay, what are the scientific evidences for God being there? And that's what gets me back to that point of, okay, it's all good. I know who God is. I know what he is. Because he's found in the evidence.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I go a little bit different route. You know, we have Scripture, we have testimony. We've got so many things that say God is who he says he is. But probably for me, the most profound thing that kind of brings me back when I start going down that road is what we just talked about. It's experience.
Yeah.
I can look back and I can see where God has no question worked in my life.
Yeah.
And then I just need to keep those. You got to wonder when the children of Israel got to the Red Sea and they turn around and they look and they see the Egyptians are bearing down on them, and they look at Moses and they're like, what are we going to do? You got to think there was one guy in the crowd that raised his hand and said, hey, we were following a cloud to get here.
Yeah.
Every night there was a ball of fire in the sky that brought us here. You think there was one guy that had a little bit of faith and said, it's going to be okay. And even Moses himself started praying, and God said, stop praying. Just stop. I've already told you what to do. March forward. And
use the tools I gave you.
Right. And so I hope that during these times when, because we all fall into these times in our life where you start questioning, and, we've said on this podcast before, there's nothing wrong with questioning God.
Yeah.
Because if we're truly questioning God and we're talking to God about it, that's always going to bring us closer to God.
Yeah.
But it's when we start questioning, we start turning away from God, and we start looking out to the world, that's where bad things happen.
Yep.
But if we look to God and say why, many times we'll get our answer.
That's absolutely a fact. Question number 2. When you're not in agreement with someone close to you, do you try to change their mind, or do you rely on God to do it for you? What a great question this is.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I just mentioned it a minute ago, I love to debate.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's my way is coerce.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the right way.
Well, I think it depends.
Yes and no. It's sort of like witnessing. I think that when you witness to somebody, it's not your job to make them believe. It's your job to present a case and let the Holy Spirit do it.
Right, but I think debate, many times that's what it is. It's stating your case. You're very good at that. But I also think there's times, especially when it comes to salvation issues, I think there's times to do exactly what you're great at. You are great at debating and making your case. And now you got a line to stop at, but there's also times I've got a friend that you know of that he's Jewish. I deal with this guy a lot.
Yeah.
And he made the comment to somebody one time that he didn't need me to save him. He's Jewish. He knows the Bible, at least half of it. And he's not one, he knows where I stand. He knows what I believe. He knows the Bible. So there's nothing that I'm going to say that's appropriate in the debate category. So I choose I never talk about it.
Yeah.
But I live my life in a way around him that points to Christ.
Yeah.
And because that's all God needs. God needs us to be obedient, and obedience in this case is, at least in my mind, my conviction is words aren't going to do here. It's the preach the gospel, and if necessary, use words. You know, we've heard that quote by it's attributed to Francis of Assisi. My conviction with this gentleman is preach the gospel without using words.
Yeah.
Because he knows. It's very clear. But with some people, they don't know.
Yeah.
And so we do have to make the case. And so I think that's where, man, going in for a conversation about salvation, you've got to be prayed up.
Yeah.
Because I shouldn't say we can mess that up. We can't mess that up. But we can get in the way. We can become a stumbling block in those conversations if we're not really prayed up. It's not something you just go off the cuff with.
But at the same time, we're way too reluctant, I think, often to share. Now, as you mentioned, it has to be done in the right way, and we often want to really be forceful when it's a time to be, just, hey, have you ever thought about this? Rather than, hey, you're thinking wrong. That's and
too many times we go in, we don't do what we know we're being convicted to do, because so many times, and I've been there. It's happened to me more times than I care to admit, that I'm being led to say this thing or do this thing or reach out in this way, and you got that turning in the pit of your stomach. You feel your inside temperature going up. You start getting cotton mouth, and you're like, God is kicking me to do this. And we use things like, well, I don't want to get involved, or that's not my place, when God is clearly telling us to take that step. And the times that I have made that step, it was the best thing I ever did.
Yeah.
But it's a spiritual battle between a holy God and our flesh at that moment. Yeah. And you can feel those times. Yeah. I mean, it's so obvious what's going on, but too many times we cower down.
Yeah.
And that is where God doesn't want us.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, too many times we're caught up in our own arrogance, maybe?
Yeah.
That we know what you need, and we're going to tell you, and you don't have those feelings at all inside you, and that's also a dangerous place to be.
It is. Have you ever, I've always wondered what God thinks of this situation, because I'm sure you've been through this situation, I know I have, where God clearly tells you to do or to say something to somebody, and then you don't do it, and then you walk away, and he just whacks you over the head with a 2x4, like, why didn't you do what I was asking you to do? So you turn around and you go back to that person. And I've always wondered, because the conversation always turns out well, like you mentioned, but you go back to that person and you wonder if God giggles as you turn around. Just like, it's
he'll get it one day.
Yeah, one of these days he'll do it on the first try.
Yeah.
Question number 3. Have you ever gotten what you asked for, but it was different than what you imagined? And did that feel like a blessing or something else?
I really thought about this question, and I know I have, but I'm drawing a blank here.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I usually don't draw blanks on these questions, but I've been thinking about this one for a couple hours.
Well, I remember I've mentioned before about working for Shaw for 25 years.
Right.
And then being gone. And I remember praying for a job. And I remember while I was still at Shaw, I wanted to do something different. And I remember praying for and wanting. I remember there was one particular job. There was a job at a place in Dalton that I felt like I was really suited for. It was a really good opportunity, and I really wanted that, and it didn't happen.
Uh-huh.
And I look back on that, now, and I go, well, I know why it didn't happen.
Right.
God had other plans.
Yeah.
But in the moment, you look at those and you go, God, why? Why would you do that to me? Mm-hmm. It's like he's flicking you on the head, going, I'm doing better. Will you just shut up?
Yeah, I guess when I was thinking about this morning, and I wanted, this is not the example that I wanted to use, but when you say it like that, I had this stack of prayer rocks on my desk. Mm-hmm. You've seen them, mm-hmm. And it's where when I commit, I mean, I should have a desk full of these, but I don't. But there's things that I commit to pray for, people that I commit to pray for, and I'll write their name, and I'll write the situation, and I'll put the date on it, and I'll put those on my desk and pray for them. And I've had the opportunity to share those with people. I'm thinking of a couple, for instance, that they were headed for divorce, and I really started praying for them, and as well as many other people were praying for them, and then their marriage was restored, and I had the opportunity to give them that. Wow. And man, it was awesome to be able to do that. But there's some where I haven't had that opportunity yet, and some that I will never have that opportunity because that prayer wasn't answered for whatever reason. And that's fine. All of our prayers aren't answered. And but I was looking at one this morning that was if they're answered in some way, or there's no need to pray for that anymore, I put them in a glass jar. And the one that was facing toward me was, I was praying for my dad after, some of you've heard the story of my dad. He got saved really kind of radically, and it was the beginning of his cancer journey when he got saved. And I was praying for Dad to get active in church. And, once Dad had his cancer surgery, he had a colostomy, and he was just very self-conscious about going out in public because, colostomy, I get it. Yeah. But I was still praying. I wanted him to get active in church. And I was looking at that this morning, and I thought, I was praying for him to get active in church, but now he's with Jesus.
Yeah. He's active now.
Yeah, and in my infinite, my finite mind, I'm thinking, well, that prayer really didn't get answered. But now, the way you're talking, it's like, yeah, he's pretty active now. He's with Jesus.
That's right.
We go to church to worship Jesus and encounter Jesus, but he's in church all day long, every day right now. Yeah. So, I guess that's an example, maybe.
Yeah, I like that.
It was different than what I was praying for.
Yeah, I think that happens all the time.
Yeah. While you're working hard to keep your body in shape physically, the music you listen to while you run can help keep you in shape spiritually. We've partnered with J Radio to put together a group of running playlists by Dean, Lane, Holly, myself, and others that you hear here on the Run for God podcast. Plus, you can listen to a playlist put together by members of Run Club just like you. Check out the whole station of Run for God playlist at jradio.com and in the J Radio app.
All right, we're back. So you coached a number of years, and what do you think is the craziest story from your coaching days?
I'm seeing your note right below this, and that's actually a note that I had at the end, and I didn't see this note. But, that was the one that I had written down. We had a young lady, Sarah J.
Yep.
Came to – it kind of goes along with your story.
It does.
She showed up. Her and her sister and her brother were all on the triathlon team, and Sarah's a very talented athlete. Actually won a national championship when she was 10 in the sport of triathlon.
Yeah.
And she showed up one day in a pair of blue jeans, and I said, "You not running today?" She said, "Nope." Like teenagers, they just kind of have that attitude of,
I
don't care what you say, I'm not running today, but I'm here in my blue jeans. And I said, "Well, you're running. Today's time mile day." Time mile back then was, we did it every few weeks. We were doing a time mile because that was kind of the benchmark.
And it was a big deal.
It was a big deal.
Yeah.
Time mile day.
Yeah.
And I said, "You're running." She said, "I got blue jeans on." I said, "I don't care. You're running the time mile." And, we did it so frequently that to PR was a pretty big deal because it's not like you had a year of training to PR, and so PRs weren't as common as you would think. Because we were doing them so frequently. And I'll never forget, she was so mad at me. I mean, just so mad at me. I don't even remember how old she was, 12 or 13 probably. And she got on that track and she PR'd in blue jeans.
Yep.
And I use that story all the time now, that
I remember,
because of our excuses, just like your story is going to talk about. We all have these excuses of why I can't run, why I can't whatever. Well, this girl showed up and said, I can't run because I have blue jeans on. And it was not a little PR. It was a pretty big PR, if I remember right.
I remember it. Yeah. It was a big deal.
So, that's one of the crazy stories. From
and it may have led to, that may in part in the back, having that story in the back of my mind may have led to this story and what we're about to talk about.
Yeah, I love this story.
It's time for Dean's Thoughts. That's a time when I share something that I've written about the intersection between running and faith. And we've all been resistant to doing something we didn't really want to do. Mm-hmm. We often have things to learn that we don't know that we need to learn, and they come through these things we don't want to do often. So sometimes there's things we're convinced we don't want to learn, but we learn anyway. And so this one is called The Lessons We Don't Want to Learn. Cross country and track are sporting events that usually go on despite the weather, unless there is persistent lightning in the area. And that was the case recently when our Dalton State Roadrunners were in Gulf Shores, Alabama. The meet had to be canceled after the first event was run, and it was a bummer. So what do you do when the thing that you've been planning for suddenly is not there? We've had our share of that kind of thing over the past year, with the pandemic causing havoc in all of our daily activities. We've had some runners who were not going to get to run in this case. It was a 6.5 hour ride with an overnight stay, and now it was ruined, right? Or was it? When faced with a situation like that, most people just pack up and go home. So that's what we did. But we also decided to stop along the way to make lemonade out of lemons.
I think you decided to stop.
That could be. After driving over 3 hours and escaping the ugly weather, we found a track at a college in LaGrange, Georgia. It was our third try. The first school we came to didn't have a track. The second was closed off from the public. But where there's a will, there's a way. Or at least where there's a coach's will. The third school was perfect. We had 6 ladies who needed to get a race in that day. After all, we had cut back on our volume of training a little to be ready for this day. We had scheduled the meet to help get us fitter for the end of the season meets. In order to make the plan work for the best possible outcome, we really needed to run a race. But here's the thing. The only person who was excited about getting off a bus and running hard was the coach. It felt a little like twisting arms. They're a great bunch, so they're going to do what I asked them to do, but they didn't have to like it. In the end, 5 of the 6 ran PRs. After the cool-down run, and while they were stretching, I asked this question: are you glad you just did that? Of course, they were happy that they had done it. We've talked about how we just need to get out the door and go for a run. Once it's done, we're never upset that we did it. Most of the time, it feels really good to have completed something hard. Very often, we find that the run is far better than we thought it was going to be. In this case, these ladies had a coach pushing them to do something they didn't want to do, but they did it, and they were happy they did. Isn't that the way a lot of things we do? Isn't that the way with a lot of things we do? Running is an obvious one, but that's the tip of the iceberg. It can be difficult to find time to study the Bible, but we have to do it. We get so busy we fail to find time to pray, but we have to do it. There are times when we love walking out the door to go for a run. Those days are great. Some of them result in spectacular experiences, but we don't get to those great days without being in great shape. And we don't get into great shape without having those days we don't want to run, but we do it anyway. Likewise, I've heard some pretty special moments during I've had some pretty special moments during Bible study, but I also had many days of forced reading. I've had those days when I didn't want to do it, but I did it anyway. Just like running. I have always been glad that I did it afterwards. Without those days, I would never have days where I get up at 4 a.m. to make sure I have time for Bible study, to find that God seems to be sitting on the couch right next to me. In short, there are lessons we don't want to learn, but they often form the basis of our fitness and our knowledge of the Bible, or even God himself. We can't stay on the bus and sleep when there's a race to run. It might feel good in the moment, but you may miss a big payoff, and it's just not worth it.
Good story, Dean.
Yeah, the point of this one is a good one, but of course there was more to this story than what I wrote into it. They really didn't want to. Here's what happened. So one of the girls comes to me, and while we're on the bus ride, after we've been riding for a couple hours, and says, everybody's really down. They don't really want to get off this bus and go run this thing. And she said, how about if we do it tomorrow? Could we do that? And I'm like, yeah, we'll do that. I'll meet everybody at the track and we'll do it Sunday afternoon. Well, I said, go back and talk to everybody. She went back to talk to everybody. Well, after a few minutes, she still wasn't back. And I thought, uh-oh. So I got up, I walked to the back of the bus, and turns out a couple of them had something else planned for Sunday and they couldn't be there. And so I said, you're sure you can't be there? And she said, yes. And I said, well, then we're getting off the bus to run.
Today it is.
So we get off the bus, they get off the bus, and they're like, nobody's saying a word. Because it's like, I can't believe we're doing this. But we're doing this. We walk down to the track, and they're just all kind of standing around there on the track. And I'm like, well, you're going to need to get warmed up in order to do this. And so they start to jog. Well, they get their warm-up in, which is a little quicker than they would normally warm up, and they come to the line. And they're all but one of them are wearing training shoes. And I looked at them and I said, what are you doing? And realize now I don't talk to these ladies this way very often, right? I said, what are you doing? I told you this was a race. Why do you not have your spikes on? And they all looked at me and I said, go to the bus, put your spikes on, and quit feeling sorry for yourself. They kind of hung their head. They walked back to the bus. They all put their spikes on. I said, well, let's get in a couple of strides now. Come on. And they all did. And they just seemed reluctant, right? Like, I don't really want to do this. So finally, they get on the line, and I said, listen, 10 years from now, you're going to talk about this day. You're going to talk about that time that crazy coach made you get off the bus and run a time trial on a bus ride home. The way that you finish that story from there depends on what you do in the next 5 minutes. So let's make a special memory, one where you can go, and then I ran a PR, rather than, and then I blew it. Okay? You got your choice right here, right now. And boom, they took off. And they went after it hard from the beginning. They all went out too hard for the
running
first
mad.
lap, and they were all mad. And 5 of the 6 of them ran PRs. And, they were all surprised. Today, I talked to them yesterday, a couple of them, and they're like, yeah, I still can't believe I ran a PR.
Yeah, I talked to one of them last night.
Yeah.
And we need more of that. We need more of that with our young people.
Yeah.
Encouraging them, or making them, I'll use the word making them, do the hard things. Do the things that they don't want to do, because their life is going to be full of those moments. And our tendency nowadays is to just whatever's easier.
Yeah.
Because it's easy on us.
Yeah.
That was not a fun conversation for you.
No.
You would rather have them just got off the bus and been, or you could have just packed it up and said, yeah, let's go home. Great coaches, great parents do the things that are hard and they don't like to do. I don't like to discipline my kids. I don't. I never understood that when I was young, when my dad would come in and say, this is going to be harder on me than it is you. I never understood that till I was a parent. And it is. It's hard. You don't when they're struggling and in trouble, it's almost like we are too, because we take that on us. But the discipline, the making them do the things they don't want to do because you know it's good for them, is what we should do. And we need more of that. Kudos to you.
Well, if you think about, again, 10 years down the road, as I said, when they are faced with that next hard thing that they don't really want to do, you hope they kind of look back on this and go, I remember not wanting to do that, but I did it and it turned out great. And you get enough of those moments built up, and it's like what we were talking about a little while ago, and seeing God work. Mm-hmm. You see enough of that positive thing come from forcing yourself to do something, and you eventually get to the point where you're like, well, I know I need to do it.
Yeah.
So that's what you hope.
Yeah.
If you've ever participated in any sport, you've probably met a great coach. Great coaches inspire us to do more than we ever thought possible. You can be the leader that helps others achieve things they never thought possible. You, yes, you have the ability and the opportunity to be that person. All you need is a heart to help people and the ability to follow a plan. The Run for God 5K Challenge will come ready to help you inspire those around you. The step-by-step guide will direct you how to plan, pray, and train people both physically and spiritually. You can help them become more fit in their health and in their walk with Christ. Share your passion. Go to runforgod.com to find out how to inspire others to accomplish big things.
So one thing I failed to mention about that story was that you sent me a couple of videos, because you had some videos of a couple of those ladies when they were very young.
Yes.
And so I shared them with the bus, and it was good.
Yeah, at the time those videos were done, I guess Rebecca was, I think she said
13.
13.
She was 12. No, 13.
So it has been six years ago, I guess, 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And we were doing a year-end video for the triathlon team, and I just had them all get on camera and say their name and their age, and it's just kind of a cool thing to have for the year-end video. Well, the cool thing now is all these kids are graduating, they're in college, and so I'm dropping these videos just at the whatever time I think's appropriate. And I just thought it was appropriate because 2 of the girls are now running for you.
That's right.
And I thought it would be appropriate that you were armed with those videos to get the good embarrassing moment. But yeah, I mean, kind of back to that whole topic, I actually got a text a couple years ago from one young lady that was on our team, and she was thanking me, and that's probably the most favorite text I've ever gotten from an athlete. Was, she was one of those that you really had to push and push and push, and she was going through something at the time. I think she might have been, maybe it was when it was high school cross country practice, and everybody had given up during this practice, and she was able to push through. And after that, she sent me a text, and she said, thank you. She said, today I was able to get through. I had the choice because the coach was just letting people mail it in, and I pushed through it, and that's because of what, the slave driver Mitchell back then, that's what they thought. But she was seeing now that there's a benefit of pushing through these hard times, and she was seeing that benefit. And that's probably one of the most favorite texts that I've ever received from an athlete. Yeah. Because you catch a little glimpse into what we're doing. As hard as it may be sometimes, and as mad as they may get at us sometimes, it's worth it. Yeah, yeah. And there are spiritual things that happen in their lives as well. Sure. That something you said or something you did or some prayer that you prayed that made a difference too and made them think. Well, Eliud Kipchoge, he's back in form. He's back. Did you hear that? Yeah, I saw that. Weekend, yeah. He was supposed to run the Hamburg Marathon apparently, but they decided to cancel it. I guess they're crazy over there in Germany right now. So they moved over to the Netherlands to I don't know if it was an airport, I think. And they were on a tarmac, and they ran this marathon there. And he ran a 2:04:30. That's pretty fast. And he was more or less by himself. So, I think in the end he looked at it and he was like, he felt like he could go faster,
under different circumstances. And so all this talk about his early demise after the London Marathon, it looks like was premature. It looks like he really did have the problem that he said he had. And, man, we're going to see some Eliud Kipchoge in the Olympic marathon, and he's going to be right there in the
How
mix.
old is he now?
I think he's 36, I want to say.
So he's not a young guy.
I think that's right. I may be getting him mixed up with someone else. But, I think he's not I don't think he's real young.
Now, how about like Rupp, Galen Rupp? How old is he? He's younger, isn't he?
Yeah, he's a little bit younger.
So he's in his 20s?
I want to say Rupp is 30 now.
Oh, okay.
But he's probably just right at 30. I'd say he's within 2 years on one side or the other of 30. So talk about Rupp, the U.S. guys and ladies. I went and I kind of checked on them recently just to see how they're doing, the ones that are running the Olympic marathon. And, of course, Galen Rupp is the guy that's our big hope for America is Galen Rupp. And
what is his PR?
205, I think. 205 or 206. But Galen Rupp, that is one talented kid. And he's changed coaches. Because he was coached by Salazar, Salazar's band. So he's now coached by Mike White, who's the Northern Arizona elite coach. And it seems to be going well for him there. And he basically says, there's no ifs, ands, or buts as far as the Olympics goes. He wants to win. He's not conceding to Kipchoge or anybody else or any of the Kenyans. He's like, I want to win this thing. And I'll tell you what, where that guy has got one heck of a will. So I wouldn't put it past him.
Have they run against each other ever, Kipchoge and Rupp? Recently, or?
I don't. Was Kipchoge in the last Olympic marathon? I think he wasn't he? I don't know. I think they have. And then, of course, the other guys, Jake Riley has dealt with some not just some nagging injuries, but he feels like he's going to be ready when the time comes, and that's hopeful. He's a relatively young guy, and then you got the other side of the coin. Abdi Rahman, who's over 40. I think he's 43 or 44 by now. This is his 5th Olympic marathon. That's crazy. But he missed nearly 3 months of training with a stress fracture. So not sure it's going to be really tough for a guy his age to come back and get back into that kind of fitness level. But again, he's been around so long, you just can't put it past him. On the women's side, you got Alafine Tuliamuk. If you remember, she's the one. She won the U.S. Olympic trials, and then she got pregnant, and she's had a baby since then. And so her thoughts are, I want to do something so incredible that nobody can believe it. And for her to come out and maybe win the Olympic marathon, that would be that. That would be crazy.
Yeah.
That would be crazy.
Yeah.
So that's kind of her goal. Molly Seidel. She's had a great year of training. She's really embraced this whole idea of COVID and the idea that she's had this uninterrupted block of training. So we don't really know at this point. She hasn't gone out and raced much, so we don't know where she's at. But it wouldn't surprise me to see Molly Seidel surprise a lot of people at the Olympics. And then Sally Kipyego, who finished 3rd in the Olympic trials. If you remember, she was a former Olympic medal winner when she was a Kenyan. She won I think it was a silver medal in the 10K for Kenya. I think she's the dark horse for America. I think she's the one that really has a chance. This will be her first Olympics in a USA uniform, and I think she's got a chance to do really well. So we'll see. She's got the experience, that's for sure. And talking about marathons, let's go back to the marathon and talk about a trivia question here. Here's the trivia question for this week. There is a guy who started 61 Boston marathons and finished 58 of them. Matter of fact, he won a couple of them. Who is he, and where is the statue of his likeness located? All right, so there is a guy who ran a bunch of them.
Yeah, I don't know this one.
It's funny because I don't hear his name these days, but I remember back in the 80s, back when I had first started running, this guy, I mean, you heard his name associated with Boston Marathon, like, I don't know. What name is most synonymous with the Boston Marathon? You remember Rick and Dick Hoyt? when they were doing the Boston Marathon every year. You know,
Sure.
you heard about them every year. Well, this guy was the same way.
Yeah.
So
Dick just died.
Yeah.
Did you see that?
Yeah. So if you know the answer to that, send a message to dean@runforgod.com. Not through Messenger or anything else, but through dean@runforgod.com. Incidentally, I've had some people that message me for running related questions, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Just know that
For the trivia question.
the trivia question has to be through email.
Right.
But other questions, some people have done that through Messenger, and that's okay. I'm just not real good at even noticing sometimes I have a message through Messenger.
Right.
So if it takes me long to get to you, that's probably why.
Right.
Email I get to usually quicker. All right, so every week we share a reason why running is so awesome, and I think I'm going to
This is not one of them.
I am going to get some pushback from Mitchell on this one, but it's a fact. Track meets. I love track meets. There's so many events in track meets. You've never really gotten yourself into these other events.
I haven't.
So you just kind of hang out and you wait.
I think it's like watching paint dry.
Yeah, but that's because you're waiting for the distance events. But there's some other events that are pretty interesting to watch.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the whole idea of the pole vault, of taking this flexible pole and running as fast as you can, sticking this thing into a tin can, basically, and then flinging yourself.
I will
over
admit
a
that
bar.
takes some guts to do that. I couldn't imagine. If you really look at what they're doing, they're taking a pole that's 16 feet. I don't know how long they are. It looks like about 16 feet.
Depends on the pole, but
And they're running with it out in front of them, and they have to ram it in a very specific spot on the ground, 16 foot out in front of them. And if you miss, it's gonna hurt. I mean, I just see myself trying that, being impaled with that pole vault pole.
Well, I'll tell you, I just talking to a guy this past weekend who was a decathlete in college, and he was a decathlete for the University of Georgia, and he was pretty good, and he obviously did the pole vault because that's part of the decathlon, and he was telling me about a time when his pole broke. And when a pole vault pole breaks, it doesn't just break in half; it just shatters.
Yeah,
and
I guess that's a safety mechanism.
Yeah, I would think
it's kind of
so.
It's kind of like tempered glass.
Yeah.
Because if it just broke in half, that could be deadly.
It could be.
Yeah.
And so, but he said after that, it took him some time to get over that.
I bet.
I can't imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, he said, it sounds like a gun going off when they break.
Oh, I'm
too.
sure.
Yeah. The hammer throw. Have you ever seen the hammer throw? You've probably never seen the hammer throw.
Yeah, well,
Have you
on
seen it?
TV.
On TV,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, it's even great. It's fun to watch in person. Those guys, they get to moving so fast. It's crazy. And then I don't know how, because they're spinning. And they're spinning so fast, I don't know how they let it go at the right time.
Yeah. Yeah, I would hit somebody or something, or it would be catastrophic. And if you hear "Happy Birthday" going on right now, for some reason Ted and some of the guys are in the next studio over, and they've sang "Happy Birthday" like 4 times. So I don't know what they're doing, but if you hear "Happy Birthday" going on, that's what it is.
Yeah, well, it's all good. It's all good. So maybe it's your birthday today, and they sung it
and
for
we
you.
just don't know. Yeah.
This is God working things out
Yeah.
for you. The javelin, the triple. Have you ever watched a triple jump?
Yes.
That's another fun event.
It's not fun to watch.
It is fun to watch.
No, it's not.
It's great fun, man.
It's what I love about cross country. It's what I love about triathlon. You go, you race, you're gone.
You don't have a lot of patience.
It's about like a swim meet. That's why I'm so glad that Lane doesn't actually swim for the schools, because in a track meet with Lane, let's use Lane as an example. Typically, he runs the 2 mile, which is the first event, and then he runs the mile, which is kind of in the middle, and then he always wants to jump in because they're fun. The 4x4, which is the very last event, and high school, and I'm not saying anything bad about the coaches, because I know track meets are so volunteer driven to make them go smooth. So I'm not casting any blame on anybody, but high school cross country meets can last 5 hours.
Track meets.
Track meets, yeah. Track meets can last 5 hours.
Yeah.
So you're sitting there for 5 hours to watch a total of 15 minutes of running.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. That's
so
why.
thank goodness, at least for our home track, it's a mile from my house, so I'll come and watch the 2 mile. I'll go home and I'll do my run or take a shower, and I'll come back and watch the other events. So I'm not as enthused about track meets as you are.
Well, I will say this. I obviously go to a lot of college track meets.
And they run quicker.
They're run much more efficiently.
Right.
And so
although we did have one a few weeks ago. Southeast. Holly and I left and went there, which is about a 20-minute drive. We watched 3 of Lane's events, and we're back home in less than 2.5 hours.
You know who runs that meet?
A guy that knows how to run a track meet.
The guy who was a decathlete in college whose pole snapped in half.
Really?
Yeah.
Was it Durham?
Yeah.
Coach Durham? Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, he knows how to run a track meet.
He does.
For sure.
Does. But he's kind of like you and I. He really doesn't have much patience.
Yeah, if you're not at the starting line, then he's starting without you.
That's right.
Most coaches, they'll be waiting. You know how teenagers are. They're going to hem-haul. Well, if you're hem-hauling, you're not running with him, and I like that.
When I was in high school, there was a time when we were at a track meet that went a lot faster because it was just a dual meet. It was just 2 schools. And I was standing in the bathroom looking out the window at the track and watched them start the 800 meters, which I was supposed to be in.
And it wasn't their fault.
No, it wasn't their
your
fault. It was my fault.
As it should be.
And I'll tell you, after the discussion with my coach, I never did that again.
Yeah.
Because it was very clear that I didn't ever need to do that again.
Right.
Our motivational thought of the week is this. It comes from Benjamin Mays. The tragedy in life doesn't lie in not reaching your goals. The tragedy lies in having no goals to reach. Man, I love that sentiment. Because that's where a lot of people fail. They fail because they don't have goals. And we should all have goals. And you should have goals in every area of your life. Physical, spiritual, your family-related goals, work-related goals. You should have goals.
If you have no goal, you'll hit it every time.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. All right. We're doing great, right? The 10K is off and running. We're getting a lot of comments, a lot of good, positive things happening there. You guys still, that Facebook page is incredible. Supporting one another, watching you edify each other is just awesome to watch. So just keep glorifying God in your running and everything else that you do. And may God bless every step of every run. Go out there and shine your light.
Good job, Dean.
For more information about the Run for God ministry, go to runforgod.com. If you have questions about your salvation, click on the Peace with God tab. There's nothing more important. Thanks for joining us today.